Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Welcome back.
This is season 2, episode number 41, a commitment to grow and develop from comfort to character. So listen, these last few podcast episodes, we've been talking about mentoring. And you may be saying, why are you hitting this so much, Rick? Well, here's the reason why. Because I have seen organizations, they will just automatically point somebody out and say, it's your job to mentor this other person here, with no instruction whatsoever, no understanding of what mentoring is. The person doing the assigning doesn't know what mentoring is, and the person who's just been told to mentor doesn't know what mentoring is. And so that's why I am spending so much time with this along with Emily. So with that being said, you do not have to be a firefighter to listen to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick. Emily and I talk about all things related to leadership. And this topic today does relate to leadership. And if you've been listening to the previous episodes, you've heard us talk about several things. Our last one was communication and actively listening. So today, the first thing I want to address is a promise to pursue growth through commitment. Commitment. Something that's like Emily, that's a dirty word.
It is like a cuss word now.
Yeah, it's like a cuss word. But a commitment is a pledge or promise. It's an obligation. And when we are involved in somebody else's life, that requires a personal investment in our growth. Uh-oh, you mean I got to invest time in my growth? Yeah, absolutely. And in their growth. However,
Yeah.
I will say this right here. If you're listening to our podcast, you're already investing in your growth. And Emily and I commend you for taking the time to jump on here and listen.
Yeah.
So today we are going to talk about the actions that are needed to actually and grow and develop as a mentee. But before we continue, I want to announce that on September the 25th, we're going to have our first guest. He's Chris Robinson, Executive Vice President of the Maxwell Certified Leadership Team. Emily and I are excited about having Chris come on board. I met him in person for the first time at a Maxwell event in June, and Chris offered to come on the podcast. And it's like, absolutely. So that'll be up and coming. So, Emily, as we continue with our topic.
Yes, we want to ask our listeners, are you committed to more than just meeting? Are you committed to changing? So we're going to dive right on in. Before we dive in, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I just think, oh, commitment to changing. Ooh, maybe change? No way. So, sorry, go ahead.
Yes. So we are going to start out with a character, and we're going to talk about Peter Procrastinator. And I had to say that very slow because it's quite the tongue twister for me. So go ahead and tell us the story of Peter the Procrastinator.
Yeah, and you talk about stagnation. Peter the Procrastinator. And this individual was not a firefighter. It's a person that we went to church with several years back, and he still stands out as a prime example of a procrastinator. He'd want to meet with me to talk about career development. It's like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Guy was always on time, but he talked a good game, and he never took any steps to change. Never. And it became evident to me that he talked the game, but he was trapped by fear of failure. And he was working in a technical business that most places had required a college degree in chemistry. And this guy had learned this stuff in the family garage.
Wow.
And as much as he wanted to leave the family business, he couldn't, because he didn't have a degree in chemistry. So he couldn't go to another company and do what he was doing. But it was always questionable as to what he was doing, as far as personal growth was concerned. He would complain about the owner of the company. which was his father. He would complain about other employees. He would complain about the business. And after a while, I just got to the point is like, I'm not spending any more time with this guy. And we have to know where to draw the line.
Yeah.
As I like helping people, I like investing time in other people's lives. I like seeing people grow. And I've seen this also, Emily, in the fire service as well, with some people. But fear, the fear of failure, the fear of change, and then even in the midst of all those fears, I'm comfortable with the status quo. I hate it, but I'm comfortable with it because I got a paycheck and I
Yeah.
got benefits that come along with it. So, desire without discipline is nothing more than a daydream, just daydreaming, laying on your back out on the grass, watching the clouds go by and saying, oh, that one looks like a kitty cat. You know? Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about John Maxwell's law of intentionality. And that basically states that growth doesn't just happen.
Yeah, that's right. And it's amazing, Emily, that some people think that it does.
Yeah, or they think they can just show up one time and boom, I'm growing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
done. I don't need any more sessions.
Right. It's not a kernel of corn that's put out in the field, and then the summertime comes, the stalks are grown and there's ears of corn.
We
You
still have to
know,
tend to it.
yeah,
No
yeah.
matter.
And you harvest them.
Yeah.
Our growth as humans doesn't happen that way. It demands a self-awareness. There are four levels of competence. Unconscious incompetence, and I'll use the example of driving. You got somebody who's growing up, some kid that's growing up, and they want to learn how to drive, and it's you know, you know, I can do this, so forth like that. And that's that unconscious incompetence. Then they actually get behind the steering wheel for the first time. It's like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. That's conscious incompetence. Then, as they get a little bit better, there is conscious competence. They have to think through everything they're doing. They're becoming competent. Start the vehicle, put it in gear, drive it, windshield wipers if it's raining, so forth like that. Then they get to the point of unconscious competence. I went out this morning to meet a guy for a cup of coffee, and I didn't have to say to myself, number one, unlock car. Number two, get in. Number three, close door. Number four, put on seatbelt. Number five, place key in column. Number six, turn key. No, no.
I'd be
Now,
concerned.
yeah, absolutely. You ought to be concerned if I was doing that. Now, with all that being said, we know that there's an abundance of stupid drivers that are out there, and so they still fall back into that incompetent realm. But nevertheless, we need to be self-aware. Where are we at? Where are we at in our growth? Put a stake in your ego.
Yeah.
Put a stake in your ego and ask questions. Take ownership of the fact that you don't know everything. Ricky Davis does not know everything. I had to do quite a bit of research before Emily and I ever started doing the podcast. Like,
Yeah.
how in the world does this stuff happen? I heard people say,
Yeah.
just get on Zoom and do it. Okay, yeah, right. Yeah. So I had to ask questions. I bought a book. I
Sat
listened.
down with someone.
Yeah, I sat down with somebody. I listened to a couple podcasts. I read several online articles. I had to ask, so we just didn't hop into this thing. And you know what? There's discomfort when we don't know anything. Was there discomfort for Emily and I to start this podcast?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. There was discomfort. Is how is this thing going to come out? And after we spend 20 to 40 minutes on Zoom, you know, is it even going to be recorded?
Yeah. We did have that one time
Yeah.
where we were halfway through recording a podcast and I looked down and I noticed that the microphone wasn't plugged in. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, and so we had to start all. I think that's embracing that discomfort. And you know what? We had a choice. We could get ticked off and get mad and get upset,
Yeah.
but we did what we just did right here. We laughed about it and said, "Well, okay,
Good trial run.
yeah, good trial run." And actually, when
Really needed to be a trial.
yeah, it needed to be a trial run because when we came back and we did the one that actually recorded, it
A
went
lot better.
yeah, a lot better, a lot more smoothly. And
Yeah.
then we need to do the work consistently. So Emily, with that being said, do you have a challenge for our listeners?
Yeah, we want to ask you, what are you doing on purpose to grow right now?
Huh? Would Are you saying, Emily, that requires action on their part?
I guess I am. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, action,
Yeah.
action. Yeah, I've always been amazed at the people who are not interested in growth. They're just average.
Yeah.
Are you content with being average? Oh, can't remember exactly what year it was, but in the city of Loveland, we had a human resources director who he issued a memo out to the entire city and said, we are not content with average employees. We are not content with an employee who wants to get a grade of C. We want above average and excellent employees working in the city of Loveland. Now, did that mean we still had average employees throughout the city? Of course.
Sure.
It's like as Emily quoted John Maxwell, and another one that Maxwell says is, "We are perfectly imperfect human beings." So you're always going to have somebody who's average, and they are absolutely content with being
Yeah.
average. But do you want to be that way? Do you just want to be the average, Joe or Betty Schmuckatelli, walking through life?
Yeah. And you can't force growth. It has to be the person's individual decision and choice to make
Hmm.
to want to grow.
Right.
You can't force it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Emily, let's move on to our next one here.
Yeah. So our next character that we're talking about is Danny the Disputer. So why don't you go ahead and tell us who Danny the Disputer is?
Yeah, Danny the Disputer. We went through a promotional cycle at Loveland Fire Rescue for lieutenants, and I was sitting on the promotional panel, and we had an individual that wanted to be a lieutenant. He did not get selected for lieutenant. So he sends me an email and said, "Hey, I'd like to sit down with you and get some feedback." I said, "Well, absolutely." I commended him for coming to me. Folks, I was at one point in my career as a battalion chief, after a promotional exam or even an entry level exam, it was more promotional when I did this. And I would reach out to the people who went through it and said, "Hey, let's schedule a time to sit down." And it would take a lot of my time, but I also noticed that sometimes they just weren't interested. So I came to the conclusion, don't reach out to them. If they are truly interested in growth, if they are truly interested in improving, they can reach out to me
Yeah.
as a member of the interview panel. And guess what? The number of people that I talked to drastically dropped off.
Hmm.
But this individual, Danny the Disputer, wanted to meet with me. And so I was telling Danny how the interview went from my perspective and what I saw in Danny that prevented him from being promoted to lieutenant at that time. And he began to argue with me. He began to dispute what I was saying. And I just stopped and I said, "Listen, I'm taking my time to talk to you. You wanted feedback. I'm giving you feedback. If you're going to dispute with me and argue with me about what I saw, then I'm done. Right here, right now, I am done."
Hmm.
And he stepped back and he took a pause. He humbled himself and he apologized.
Hmm.
and he listened. Ultimately, he got promoted to lieutenant.
Wow.
Today, right now, today, in July of 2025, he's a chief officer in another fire department.
Wow.
I appreciate the fact that that man humbled himself to stop and to listen. What about you?
Yeah.
Do you humble yourself to listen to other people? Yeah, yeah, we can get defensive. I know. I've become defensive at times, and I've had to be confronted, where I've needed to step back. And hey, folks, sometimes the feedback that we receive, it's not always pleasant.
Yeah.
It is like peeling, it could be like peeling a scab off a wound. It can hurt. Oh,
And a caution to throw out is you want it to be from a trusted
yes.
individual if they're giving you feedback. Because sometimes there are people who think they can just tell you whatever, and it's not truth.
Hmm.
So you really do need to have that discernment of who are you listening to. But if it's a trusted person, your trusted mentor, a friend, family member, someone who you trust that is coming at you and genuinely cares
Yeah.
for you and wants to see you succeed, then that's when we have to humble ourselves. But you always want to line it up with, okay, is this true?
Hmm.
Is this something I need to grow in? Are what they saying
Hmm.
is accurate? Just wanted to throw that out
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. Thanks for highlighting. Excuse me. Thanks for highlighting that,
Yeah.
Emily.
So the difference between growth and stagnation often starts with how we respond to truth.
Yeah, that's just exactly, what was said. How we respond? How do we respond to that truth?
Yeah.
And what Emily's talking about, what's the motivation behind somebody coming to you, to point something out? Excuse me.
Yeah.
Now, it could very well be somebody that we know that we don't trust, and they bring something up, and there may be truth to that. And we need to overcome that barrier. But in a situation like that, we really need to be discerning. Are they coming to us and saying something because they genuinely have seen it, or are they saying something because it is an attack?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So, yeah, our reaction to correction, hey, that reveals our character. That reveals our character, and it reveals how ready we are for growth.
Absolutely.
Are we willing to go from a comfort spot and go through a difficult time of growth? And folks, growth can be difficult. Sometimes the hardest things that we go through in life are character development. And we need it,
Yeah.
whether we want to admit it or not. We need that growth. So, Emily, what does real development look like?
Yeah, it is embracing those tough conversations, practicing new habits, admitting faults and working on them, asking questions, applying answers, and evaluating results.
Ah, yeah, practicing new habits. You've probably, people are listening, you've probably seen some of these things that are out there that says you need 30 days, and some days are even, or some time frames are even longer than that to create a new habit. And practicing a new habit involves that other word that a lot of people don't like, change. Uh-oh, change? Yeah, no, 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 no. I don't like change. Emily, I lost count of the number of guys in the fire department that would say, I don't like change. I don't deal with change. It's like, wait a minute. Number one, the clock is moving, so that's changed. But number two, we're in the fire department.
Yeah,
And when the tones go off, that's change. Whether we were doing a training in the station,
starting to eat.
yeah, starting to eat, it's change. Yeah, that's I always laughed at that aspect
Yeah,
right there.
I think too. I want to throw in what another real development tip could look like too is just being in reality.
Ooh.
Because, like, if we go back to Danny the Disputer, he at first was in his own reality, thinking that he did a great job and he deserved the promotion, but he knew he didn't get the promotion. So he's like, well, what was wrong? But he didn't agree with
Mhm.
you. Whereas you put him in his place in reality and is like, this is what we saw. This is what your shortcomings are. And then when he paused and took that step back, he then went back into full reality and not his reality, but embraced the true reality um, and made that commitment to change.
Yeah,
So that's another thing is just like, where is your reality? Are you creating your own reality that then is creating this cloud,
yeah.
this cloud of, uh, yeah, my brain just went blank. My
That's
brain went in a cloud.
that's my brain didn't go blank because I thought of an example in my own life of that. It's the first time I tested for lieutenant at Loveland Fire Rescue, and that was back in the 90s. And Dick Miner was the fire chief then, and I didn't get it. And when I sat down with the chief to get input, he told me, he said, you are technically and tactically competent. You know how to do the job. Then he pointed his finger at me and says, young man, if you don't change some things in your life, you will never be promoted in this fire department.
Mm.
And what he meant from that, because he went on to explain it, is, hey, typical with my Jersey background, yeah, I had no problem shooting my mouth off and letting people know what I thought about different things. And that's what he was talking about is, hey, control your responses. And in that same conversation, he said, normally I would tell people to count to 10 before they say anything. He says, but Rick, so I'm telling you, you need to count to 100 before you open your mouth.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that that I definitely needed to hear. And that ties in with these next things here, Emily, leaving our comfort zones.
Yep.
Hey, you know what my comfort zone was, Emily, back then? Well, I'm just from Jersey. That's just the way that we are.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that from other people
Yeah,
too.
or
The East
yeah,
Coast card.
yeah.
No
Yeah,
offense.
the East Coast card. Or for those of you who's been listening to this thing in the past, I was a veteran of two branches, the Air Force and the Marine Corps. And I would say, yeah, well, I was, this is how we did it in the Marines. Yeah, so I needed to break out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I shucked aside, what I did in the military. Not absolutely not at all. But that comes into breaking out of those old identity narratives, excuses.
Yeah.
When I would say, "Hey, I'm from Jersey. That's just the way that we are," that's an excuse.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I remember that we had a situation pop up at one time that we had to involve a police officer. And when the police officer showed up at the station to interview us about a particular individual, he said, "Oh, that's just the way he is." Yeah, and that just blows things off. Those are excuses, and we many times we want to run from the hard work. We want to run from getting better and getting stronger, and that's nothing more, Emily, than pride.
Yeah. And it is hard work, but it is rewarding
Yeah,
at the end.
yes, yeah.
Seeing your growth, and especially if you have a good mentor who is walking alongside of you, and then they can also acknowledge that growth too. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, it is. And folks, this also ties into, yeah, how do you want to be remembered? How do you
Mhm.
want to be remembered when you leave an organization? And I just addressed this at the end of the lesson I delivered this past Sunday to our singles group when I drew a gravestone up on the smart board, and Joe Schmuckatelli's name was on it, and I picked the date 1950 to 2025 with a dash in between because all of us right now are living that dash from
Yeah.
the date that we were born. And we don't know when we're going to die, but that dash is the legacy. What are we leaving behind? What do you want to leave behind? There are people that I have worked for and with over the years in both the military and the fire service, and then when I had to work a couple civilian jobs as well, that really good people, and some that were not so good. Some that before, when their name would come up, especially in the fire service, that when their name would come up, is there'd be a string of cuss words before their name and a string of cuss words after their name. And it just I mean, not from me because I don't cuss, but from the other people there. And it's like, wow, I mean, they are infamous. They are infamous. Is that how you want to be remembered? As the infamous Joe Schmuckatelli, or someone who has left behind a good reputation and someone who
Yeah.
has had a positive impact on people's
Yeah,
lives?
absolutely.
So,
Mentoring isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming your best self.
yes.
And that is a journey.
Y-
We
Yeah.
cannot emphasize that enough. It's a journey becoming your best self.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're not going to reach perfection. And some people out there, uh, that's where they want to be. I recently had coffee with an individual that I remember a time point that's where that guy was at. I mean, he was trying to be perfect in everything, and
That's exhausting.
yeah, it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple sayings up here on the whiteboard: is progress always beats procrastination, potential, not performance, progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
No, there's only one person who's perfect, and that's Jesus Christ. It's not the rest of us. We are not. And in the last episode, I mentioned a quote that John Maxwell uses is that we are perfectly imperfect human beings. So just like Emily said, mentoring and you're being mentored does not mean you're going for perfection, and the mentor is not perfect themselves.
Yeah.
And with that being said, is this is a two-way street. A conversation that I had with an individual this morning over coffee, a young man who's working in a company, and he's working in the aerospace division of this company and building parts for aircraft. And it was a great conversation. Yeah, I had with him, and he brought up some very valid points in the conversation, and, and we were talking about people who sit at a table and they text back and forth. Or like Emily, what we have seen several months ago in our singles group, a couple of the females texting each other back and forth, and looking at each other and smiling. And he said that's just a modern version of passing notes in grade school.
That's true.
Yeah, and this guy's 21 years old, folks. So don't dismiss people who are younger than you. But he's absolutely right. Yeah, somebody sitting in the room texting somebody else and looking and smiling at each other. That's just a modern day version of somebody in fifth grade passing notes back and forth. So we can learn from other people. And when we are working with other people, it sharpens our leadership skills.
Mhm.
Also, it could teach us patience. When we look at the other person, it's like, okay, all right. It takes time for Ricky Davis to grow. It takes time for, them to grow as well. And you know what? We need to show some empathy and sympathy, with
Yeah.
them. And last episode we talked quite a bit too about communications and listening to people.
Yeah. So when both the mentor and the mentee are committed, transformation happens, strong character is formed, and purpose-driven lives emerge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like that. So as we're winding this episode down, recap a few points here is, hey, showing up is not enough. Just like that guy I was talking about, Peter the procrastinator. He showed up, but it needs to be more than that. It needs to be a commitment.
In action.
Yeah, in action.
Yeah. And the law of intentionality means you must choose to grow.
Yep. And that true commitment transforms character, careers, and lives.
Yeah. So we want to leave our listeners with their call to action for this week to take one intentional step toward growth.
Mm.
That may look like reading a book, make the call, ask the hard question or act on the feedback. Be the Danny and not the Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, for the men that are listening to this, so many men have told me, I don't like to read. Yeah. Well, hey, guess what? I wrote The Furnace of Leadership Development, and it's in paperback form. It's in ebook form. But, for those of you that don't like to read,
Audio.
audio book. There's plenty of audio books out there that you can buy, that you can listen to, while you're cutting the grass or while you're driving down the road, whenever. So the old excuse of I don't like to read is an excuse, and is like
Yeah.
Deb, my wife, says, is an excuse. Is nothing more than the skin of reason stuffed with a lie.
Mm.
So, hey, what's been your biggest challenge in personal growth? We'd like to hear your thoughts. You don't know how to move along? Reach out to me. I mentioned my book, The Furnace of Leadership Development. Get it or listen to it, because we have a number of tips that are in there. Also, I can email you a copy of Dual Footprints, Becoming a World-Class Mentor. It's a compilation of a series of blogs that I wrote, and then Emily took it and she put her graphic art skills to work and turned it into a beautiful formatted ebook. I can send that to you. How do you get it, Davis? That's what you might be asking this. Check in the show notes. My email address is in there, rick at fireofficerleadershipacademy.com. My website is in there, www.fireofficerleadershipacademy.com. Listen, folks, if you have liked this and it's benefited to you, been beneficial to you.
I went with that.
Yeah. Please like, subscribe, and share.
Yeah.
And then when you go to my website, you can also learn about the services I have to offer. Been talking about mentoring. I mentor firefighters. I mentor people who aren't firefighters.
Yeah.
And I love doing it. Why? Why do you do that, Rick? Well, there's a verse in the Bible, Luke chapter 12, verse 48. To whom much is given, much is required. To whom more is given, more is required. And we don't have time to really delve into that, but hey, reach out. So, Emily,
Absolutely.
anything else to add before we sign off here?
Nope. If you're just looking for a book, go get his book or the audiobook.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that plug. I appreciate that. So, okay, folks, until next time, we will see you later.
Bye.